The paintings are done by Medford Neer, who was a Church of Brethren minister, and he had the gift of art and drawing, and had the vision of wanting to put the Brethren story together. So in 1944, he began painting, completed in 1949, and there, Milford, Indiana, at the Mac Youth Camp. In the auditorium, they're 5.5 feet wide, and the sections are 15 feet long in 12 sections altogether, starting from 1708 and going on through, even projecting out to 2008. But the beginning of the Brethren is after the Reformation and the 30 Years' War, and he depicted this particular scene right here. He had a man with a band-aid over his head, which represented the persecution in the 30 Years' War. After the Reformation, there was a beginning of the pietistic movement off of the Lutheran background, and this is Spener, who was an influence on Hoekman, who was a basic influence on Alexander Mack as he traveled in the area close to Heidelberg. Mack was born in Friesheim, baptized as an infant in the Reformed Church. And so as he is being influenced by a deeper spiritual life, he begins to search the scriptures himself with others. And in time he is warned that you better start coming back to the Reformed Church or there's going to be trouble. But with this, then, it caused a lot of these people to move up to a peace-loving area under the Count Henry at Wittgenstein, close to Schwarzenau and the Eder River. And as many of these people lived together, they had a difficulty in wanting to be together in one complete unit, and they kept searching, and Mack wondered, well, it is necessary for a body to exist. How could you practice Matthew 18 if that was not the case? So they began to search the scripture, more was revealed, and read the scriptures of counting the cost, and made preparations to go to the first baptism. By now they would understand immersion was the way of baptizing. So in the scene you have the angel wing in the background, the divine protection. Here's a symbol of the Lutheran Church, the Catholic Church, the Reformed Church, and here's these 8 souls coming to this decision, knowing that it would be a challenging thing to deny their infant baptism and start a believer's baptism church. Here's the resistance of the state church. And there is Mack, the support of his wife. This is a symbol of fellowship as these two are holding hands. Here's George Graby. He says, okay, let's go ahead with our understanding of the scriptures and stay as close to them as we can. So in 1708, in August, we can see them as they quietly come down from the Huttental down to the Eder River. And that morning, one baptized Alexander Mack, and he in turn baptized the rest, and they never exposed who did the first baptizing. Certainly isn't the starting of the church, but it's the effort to try to get back to the New Testament church. Notice the church frowning and not being comfortable with what's taking place, and there's a crown of a king that's not going to be very receptive to these things. So that was in 1708. Persecution begins to rise for them. Life becomes more difficult, but the church prospered and grew very quick. By 1719, Peter Becker, a part of the Brethren movement, leaves Europe, heads to Germantown with 20 other families and settled there. And so this is a symbol of the first boat, Peter Becker. There's Mack and the remaining group looking on, waiting to go in 1729 when they left. So here we see Peter Becker in this country now, 1719, the first of the Brethren to come here. There's 4 years of silence, and there's not much record kept during that time, if we can imagine trying to get settled in this new land. But on Christmas Day, they were looking and heard that one of the ministers were coming, and he didn't show up, but with the influence of others, 16 of them, 16 others, on Christmas Day wanted to be baptized, and this took place at the Wissahickon in Germantown, Philadelphia today. And so that's a symbol of the first baptism in this country. As they left the baptismal scene, they went up to John Gumry's home, And here's the first symbol of the love feast that took place. Peter Becker standing at the end, preaching. The feet washing would have been the triune love feast that we're all so familiar with the examination service, feet washing, and the fellowship meal, and then the salutation, and the bread and the cup. And they progress very swiftly. A lot of converts from the Mennonite background, a lot of our names come out of that heritage. And there we see them reaching out to others. Now they're spreading. You see, moving forward. There, this young man's pointing to the Bible. They were going by the Scripture and the Holy Book only. There is preaching. There's more baptisms, a symbol of love feast as it continued to grow across the Conestoga, that would be Lancaster area. 1729 is when Alexander Mack comes across. And here's the entry of Alexander Mack and 122 others. And then Peter Becker and those that have already been in this country. You see her wiping tears, and what a comfort it was with his 3 sons. He'd lost his wife and 2 daughters, and a welcome visitor to this country, and helped to revive the church as they settled in around Germantown. And the sons grew, and the church prospered and grew, not without problems. Here would be a symbol of the cloister element that pulled off later on. There is Beisel, and this is Martin Erner with a gavel in his hand, and this is a symbol of the first annual meeting that took place. And the concern was the Zinzendorfs were being an influence on our brethren, and they got together and decided this would not be good to try to follow his influence. Back here is a printing press of Sowers Jr., Alexander Mack Jr. Then the Revolutionary War comes on. Can we imagine how trying that would have been? And this is Christopher Sauer, stripped him of his clothes, destroyed his books, and before he died, though, he was able to pay everybody back that he owed. Church prospering and growing and heading south. This is a Garber going south. Here's the Wolves coming up the Ohio River. And then coming up into Ohio in the background, we see the covered wagons moving west and spreading across the western territories. Likewise in this scene. And again, a reminder of the angel wings and the protective hand as the church prospers and grows. Here was the first woman preacher. Somehow she was gifted above her husband, and it was not uncommon for her to step forward and preach the sermon that day. This is a scene of John Klein. He went across the Mason-Dixon line during the Civil War. You can see the men in the background. There was a good bit of hatred because he did this, moderator of annual meeting for several years. John Klein then was martyred. He went up after he was even shot off his horse, shot him again, and there's a stake there on the farm where this martyrdom took place. I remember this story. If it wasn't for John Klein, we'd probably have 2 different hymn books. Some of the North wanted to print a hymn book, and he said, no, wait until the South can have an influence on it too. So the brethren didn't divide at that time of the Civil War. They were able to stay together, and we still work together with the South. There's no Northern brethren or Southern brethren like many of the churches.
Henry Kurtz was a minister in eastern Ohio, and he decided that we, as a denomination, needed a publication that would unite us in our thought. In 1851, he conceived the idea of printing the Gospel Visitor, and it was approved by annual meeting the following year, and that is the beginning of all periodicals among the brethren. The Civil War, or the war between the states, was a great dividing point among the North and the South. Following that war was a number of colleges were established, which started to divide our way that we felt about our faith, that higher education maybe was not where some of the folks wanted to go, while others thought it was the most important thing among us. As time moved on, we sent missionaries. Now, I should say that from this point on, in 1881 and 83, these murals are a Church of the Brethren perspective. In the 1880s, we sent missionaries to India. And we also then, within a short time, sent missionaries into China. William Berry was a hymn writer, and a number of his hymns are still in the Brethren hymnal. On his 100th birthday, he stood in the Church of the Brethren in Illinois and sang one of his songs. Following the destruction in Germany and all of Europe during the Second World War, the Church of the Brethren had a very strong presence in helping to rebuild the economy. Dan West saw the need of folks for farm animals, and he conceived the idea of the Heifer Project, and this represents that. There were prayer units around what to do to help Europe. There was a huge amount of money sent over in addition to clothing to help reestablish. 1949 is when Medford finished painting, but he decided to take it through to our 300th anniversary. And he hit the nail on the head exactly with all the pestilence that has been in the world in these years. This is the old couple who were once young, looking back. This represents our love feast today. We are a multinational group of people. Interestingly, we have more members in Nigeria than we have in this country.